The unblinking, emotionless lens of a security camera captures the lobby of a luxury residential building in Praia Grande. The footage is grainy black and white. A timestamp blinks in the corner. August 31st, 2024. The city still slumbers. But for the people in this drama, the night is far from over. At 4:32 a.m., two young women appear on screen. One is Marceli Marlene Delfino Pareto, the owner of the fourth-floor apartment, and the other is her brother's wife, Rafaela Costa da Silva. They pull into the parking garage, step out of their car, and walk toward the elevator. There's no visible panic in their movements, only a certain tension, the kind born of fatigue after a long party. The elevator doors close behind them, carrying them up to the apartment that, soon enough, will become the scene of a grim crime. Silence settles over the corridors for just over an hour. It seems the night might end quietly after all. But at 5:40 a.m., motion detectors trigger again. The camera catches Rafaela Costa da Silva emerging from the apartment, alone. She heads into the elevator, her expression calm, composed. She descends to the parking garage, gets into her car, and drives away. Exactly 13 seconds after Rafaela's car leaves the premises, another vehicle pulls up at the gate. At 5:44, two men enter the elevator, 27-year-old Igor Pareto and Mario Vitorino. In the video, Igor holds a phone and gestures animatedly, speaking to Mario, who stands by the wall. The elevator doors open on the fourth floor, and the men head toward Marceli's apartment. Matching up the timestamps makes it chillingly clear the husband, Igor, and wife, Rafaela, passed each other at the building entrance just seconds apart. 20 minutes later, the apartment door opens again. Mario and Marcelli bolt into the corridor. They don't use the elevator, but race down the stairs, slip through the garage, jump into Mario's car, and leave the building. Igor Pareto remains inside the apartment. After Mario Vitorino and Marceli Pareto hurriedly exited via a service exit, the fourth-floor apartment went silent. Yet the sounds of struggle heard earlier had already unsettled other residents. At dawn on Saturday, August 31st, 2024, the building's manager, having received no response from the occupants, decided to call the authorities. When officers of the military police arrived, they rang the doorbell several times, but heard nothing from inside. To gain entry, they had to call a locksmith, who forced open the lock. The instant the door swung open, officers knew a serious crime had taken place. Their eyes were drawn to large dark stains on the corridor floor. The blood trail stretched through the entire apartment, starting in the kitchen, winding through the living and dining rooms, as though marking a gruesome path, and ending abruptly at the entrance to the bedroom. The apartment itself looked as if a hurricane had torn through. Furniture was upended, personal items scattered, the place reeked of chaos. Following the blood trail into the bedroom, officers discovered the body of 27-year-old Igor Pareto. What they saw was both strange and deeply unsettling. A large mirrored wardrobe had collapsed directly on top of him. The mirrors were shattered, their fragments scattered across the floor and over Igor's body, blending with the blood in a chaotic, horrifying mess. The object used in the attack wasn't found near the victim, but in the bathroom, a standard kitchen knife, crusted with dried blood. Investigators determined a crucial detail. The knife had been taken from a drawer in the kitchen, which was still half open. That suggested the weapon had been grabbed quickly, in a moment of rage or desperation. The medical report revealed an alarming level of brutality. Igor Pareto had been stabbed at least 40 times. The wounds were random, yet forceful, targeting his chest, head, and back. He also suffered multiple bruises, indicating he was severely beaten before his death. Reviewing the forensic details, one number jumps off the page: 40 wounds. That changes the entire tone of the case. This wasn't a moment of impulsive conflict. This was personal. Deeply personal. The pattern of injuries pointed to something investigators call overkill, when an attacker continues to strike long after the victim can no longer fight back. For detectives, that was the first major clue. The motive wasn't random. They needed to look inward at the people closest to him. To truly grasp the scale of what happened, we need to rewind, just a few hours before the elevator rose to the 4th floor. It was Friday night, August 30th. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Igor Pareto and Mario Vitorino da Silva Neto were at a big family celebration hosted by one of Igor's brothers. It was a tradition for them, an annual gathering they rarely missed. That night, the celebration had an extra layer of joy. They were also toasting a big win by their favorite soccer team. The drinks were flowing, the excitement of the game still fresh, and the atmosphere was full of laughter and camaraderie. It felt like, just for one night, all personal problems were left at the door. When the party finally wrapped up, long past midnight, Igor was planning to call a ride through an app and head over to his mom's place, where he'd been staying after a falling out with his wife. But Mario insisted, almost forcefully, that he'd drive Igor himself. What seemed like a friendly gesture, a simple act of loyalty, would become the turning point that changed everything. It was during that drive, inside the closed space of a car, where you can't walk away from a conversation, that the trigger was pulled. Mario was behind the wheel, and his smartphone was synced to the car's infotainment system via Bluetooth. Suddenly, the music, or maybe the silence, was interrupted by an incoming call. The name that popped up on the dashboard screen froze Igor in his seat. It was Rafaela. For Igor, it was a gut punch. His wife was calling his best friend, who also happened to be his sister's husband, at 3 a.m? Why? At first, he said nothing, trying to make sense of it. But silence quickly gave way to fury. He demanded an explanation. Mario, clearly rattled, dodged the question. He fumbled for excuses, trying to make Rafaela's behavior sound innocent, but never answered the call. Igor, overwhelmed by a growing sense of dread, immediately began calling and texting Rafaela, demanding an answer. But she ignored every attempt to reach her. Desperate, he opened their family location-sharing app, and what he saw hit like a punch to the gut. Rafaela's phone wasn't at their home. It wasn't with her parents either. It was pinging from his sister Marcelli's apartment. And here's the uncomfortable question. If it hadn't been for that one incoming call, accidentally broadcast through the car's speakers, would Igor have found out the truth that night? Or did fate just speed up what was bound to happen? In a heartbeat, what started as a friendly ride turned into a full-blown confrontation. Igor, now burning with jealousy and feeling a double betrayal, demanded that Mario turn the car around. He ordered him to drive straight to the apartment, to the exact spot where the GPS signal was coming from. He wasn't just going there for answers. He was driving into the hands of his own fate. Meanwhile, Mario, realizing the secret was about to explode, managed to send a brief warning to Rafaela, setting off a tragic chain of events. To understand the motive behind this crime, we have to unravel the twisted connections within what many would have seen as a tight-knit inner circle. At the center was 27-year-old Igor Pareto, a successful businessman and owner of a car dealership in Praia Grande. On the surface, he looked like the picture of stability, but the people closest to him were tied together by a tangled web of bloodlines and money. The second key figure, Mario Vitorino. He wasn't just Igor's best friend. Mario was married to Igor's sister, Marcelli, making him Igor's brother-in-law. They were also business partners, co-owners of a motorcycle shop. Then there was Rafaela Costa, Igor's wife, and the mother of his son. And finally, Marcelli Pareto, Igor's sister and Mario's wife. This was a closed circle, a brother, a sister, and their respective spouses. But behind the image of success, something was festering. Igor and Rafaela's marriage had been falling apart for some time, worn down by jealousy and alcohol. They had even separated briefly that July. And yet, here's a heartbreaking detail. Igor had been trying to fix things. Just a month before his death, he quit drinking, started working out, lost weight, all in the hope of becoming the man his wife wanted. At the same time, his sister Marcelli's marriage to Mario was also collapsing. They were already living apart. By the night of the crime, these two unraveling families had become a powder keg, and the match that lit it was a secret affair that crossed lines. It turned out Mario and Rafaela were lovers. And here's the part that stings. Igor lost his life just as he was trying to put everything right. That's what makes this loss feel especially senseless. In the end, Igor became the outlier in a situation fueled by shared assets and forbidden passion. A man who no longer fit the equation. Let's go back to the morning of August 31st. What happened after the crime is nothing short of chilling, not because of what was done, but because of how calm and methodical the three of them were. Mario, Rafaela, and Marcelli met up at a gas station. According to Rafaela, it was there that she first learned about her husband's death. But instead of calling emergency services, she joined the two people responsible. The group headed toward Rio Claro. On the way, Rafaela stopped at a store and bought new clothes for Mario. His were soaked with Igor's blood. At a hotel, Mario showered, washing away the evidence. Then the group split up. Marcelli went home, pretending to know nothing, while the two lovers continued their escape. What's most disturbing is that not one of them tried to anonymously get help for Igor. No call, no message, nothing. That level of indifference is staggering. Mario's car was later abandoned near a post office. When police found it, there was blood on the gear shift and seats. Mario had fled so recklessly, he left a trail of evidence behind him. As news of the suspect's disappearance spread, the court quickly issued arrest warrants. The women were the first to change course. On September 6th, both Rafaela and Marcelli turned themselves in, likely hoping for leniency. Mario, the one investigators believed was the main perpetrator, stayed hidden the longest. His capture came thanks to a lucky break. One of Igor's brothers received an anonymous call. The informant gave exact coordinates. Mario was hiding 185 miles away from the crime scene in the city of Toriña. His safe house? The home of Rafaela's uncle. That detail speaks volumes. It suggests Rafaela wasn't a frightened victim at all, but someone actively helping her partner evade justice, using her family's resources to do it. After a tactical raid, Mario was taken into custody, and once behind bars, any hint of love or loyalty among the three evaporated. The finger-pointing began. Each one turned on the others in a desperate bid to save themselves. During questioning, Rafaela Costa da Silva adopted a defensive-aggressive strategy. She painted Igor as controlling and dangerous, saying she left the apartment before he arrived because she feared for her safety. She admitted to her relationship with Mario, but firmly denied being involved in the crime. According to her version, she received a text from Mario while driving. It said he had put Igor to sleep and that she shouldn't come back. She claimed the clothes, the hotel, the escape, all of it, were the result of shock and irrational fear. Rafaela insisted she was simply reacting to a terrifying situation. But when you examine her actions, it's hard to reconcile them with the story of a shocked and powerless woman. Everything she did, from helping clean up to staying on the run, looked calculated, coordinated. Then there was Marcelli Marlene Delfino Peretto, Igor's own sister. Her defense was perhaps the most cold-blooded of all. She looked investigators in the eye and claimed that at the time of the crime, she was asleep. Marcelli said she had been heavily under the influence of alcohol and banned substances that night, so much so that she barely remembered anything. She admitted to a crucial detail. She and Raffaella had been intimate before the men arrived. According to her version of events, Raffaella left shortly after, and she herself went into another room, a walk-in closet she'd converted into a dressing space, and passed out. Marcelli claimed that when Igor and Mario burst into the apartment, she vaguely heard voices and some commotion. It sounded like a heated argument, but she didn't think much of it, assuming it was just another drunken spat between guys. She insisted that she never let them in. According to her, Mario had entered on his own. He knew the digital code to the lock. She said she didn't come out of her room until everything had gone silent. That's when, as she tells it, she found her brother on the floor, already gone, lying in a pool of blood. But here's the thing. If she truly had no part in it, if she'd just been asleep, then why did she flee the scene with the man suspected of the attack? Why didn't she call emergency services for her own brother? Her defense rested on total denial. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. I wasn't involved. But surveillance footage tells a different story, capturing her running from the building alongside Mario, not as a bystander, as someone in the thick of it. Mario Vitorino da Silva Neto, realizing there was no way to deny that he'd been the one holding the knife, there was simply too much physical evidence, leaned into a classic legal defense: self-defense. He claimed he never meant to harm Igor. He said he was forced to act only after Igor, having discovered the affair, flew into a rage and attacked him first. According to Mario's statement, Igor smashed a mirror and grabbed a large shard of glass, threatening him with it. Mario said he had no choice. He fought back in fear for his life, and during the struggle, grabbed a knife. To back up his version of events, Mario's attorney presented photos in court. The images showed bruises, scratches, and swelling on Mario's face and arms, offered as proof that he had indeed been assaulted. But investigators and prosecutors weren't buying it. The timing didn't add up. The photos were taken 15 days after the crime, during the period when Mario was on the run. There was no way to confirm how or when he'd sustained those injuries. For all anyone knew, he could have gotten hurt elsewhere, or even inflicted the wounds on himself. More importantly, the nature of the injuries on Igor's body told another story, one that didn't align with a desperate act of self-protection. It's hard to imagine a scenario where someone acting purely in self-defense delivers 40 stab wounds, including multiple strikes to the back. Forensics also found that the heavy mirrored wardrobe had collapsed onto Igor, pinning him to the floor. This pointed to something far more brutal, that he'd been shoved or slammed into the furniture during a violent beating. Not that he'd knocked it over himself in a fit of rage. While the suspects scrambled to twist their stories, each trying to frame themselves as victims of circumstance, forensic experts and detectives quietly built a mountain of cold, hard evidence. And in the end, it was their digital footprint that sealed their fate. Police presented a detailed report to the court built around recovered cell phone data and restored message threads, and those messages destroyed any chance of maintaining their version of events. Between Raffaella and Mario, investigators found exchanges sent just hours before the crime, where the lovers openly discussed spending the night together in celebration. But that wasn't the most damning part. The São Paulo District Attorney's Office used these messages to level a formal charge of conspiracy, citing two clear motives. The first, romantic. Igor's existence was an obstacle to their secret relationship. The second, and perhaps the more powerful one, was greed. Igor's death opened the door to serious financial gain for both of them. Mario, as Igor's business partner, stood to become sole owner of their motorcycle dealership, cutting Igor out permanently. And Raffaella, as his legal wife and the mother of his son, was positioned to inherit a large portion of his estate and take control of his assets. Even Marcelli, indirectly, had something to gain from a shift in the family's wealth structure. Cell phone tower data also confirmed that Rafaela's escape wasn't chaotic or panicked. It was coordinated. Her movements aligned closely with Mario's, showing a level of planning and intent. And then came another devastating blow to their story. The technical audit of Marcelli's apartment door lock. Marcelli had claimed Mario let himself in using a code he already knew. But the digital lock's records showed something different. The door was opened from the inside. That changed everything. It meant Marcelli wasn't asleep. She was waiting. She knew they were coming, and she was the one who opened the door for both her brother and the man who would take his life. Let me ask you, what kind of person opens the door for her own brother, knowing the man standing next to him is about to take everything from him? Prosecutors also dismantled the self-defense claim with a simple but powerful truth. The forensic analysis showed that the large mirrored wardrobe had fallen on Igor, pinning him down. That means he couldn't have been charging anyone with a shard of glass. He wasn't a threat. He was already down, immobilized, when the final, brutal blows were delivered. That detail changed the entire narrative. This wasn't a spontaneous fight. This was an execution, fueled by greed and lust. By putting together the timeline, the evidence, and the witness statements, investigators were able to reconstruct, minute by minute, a horrifying sequence of events that felt more like the plot of a horror film than a real case. At 5:44 a.m., Igor and Mario stepped out of the elevator. Marcelli, fully awake and expecting them, opened the door from inside. There was no argument in the hallway, no shouting. Igor was either lured or pushed deeper into the apartment, into the farthest room, the bedroom. And that's where it happened. This wasn't a fight. This wasn't a fair confrontation. The signs of struggle, the state of the room, they all pointed to a savage beating. Igor was taken down, knocked off his feet. At one point, the heavy mirrored wardrobe was brought crashing down on top of him, trapping him, making sure he couldn't move, couldn't fight back. The shards of glass embedded in his body were just the beginning. While Igor, likely stunned and disoriented, struggled to free himself from beneath the fallen furniture, Mario moved with chilling determination. He left the bedroom, crossed the apartment, and headed straight for the kitchen. He wasn't just grabbing the nearest object in panic. He went directly to a drawer, opened it, and pulled out a sharp kitchen knife. The drawer was left half open, a silent trace of urgency and intent. With the knife in hand, he returned to the bedroom to finish what he'd started. Marcelli was still inside the apartment the entire time. She wasn't hiding in a bathroom. She was present for all of it. Whether she blocked any escape routes or simply stood there and watched, one thing is certain: she didn't intervene. What followed was what forensic experts later called overkill. Mario didn't stab once or twice. He struck more than 40 times. The wounds were delivered to Igor's chest, head, and back. This wasn't self-defense. It was a full-on explosion of hatred, a ruthless effort to erase someone completely. Igor died in agony, surrounded by two people he once trusted more than anyone, his sister and his closest friend. This reconstructed timeline is chilling because it reveals that in that room, in those final moments, there was nothing human left, just raw aggression and cold, deliberate action. And when Igor stopped breathing, his attackers didn't call for help. They didn't even pause. They stepped over the body of the man they once called brother and began their escape. But in late 2025, the case took a shocking turn, one that stunned not only Igor's family, but the entire nation. What seemed like a straightforward trial suddenly split the defense wide open. In October 2025, the court made a decision that would shake public opinion. Rafaela Costa da Silva was released from custody. The judge ruled that while her actions, and moral character were certainly questionable. There wasn't enough direct evidence placing her at the scene during the act itself. Physically, she wasn't in the apartment when the attack happened. The decision outraged the Pareto family. Prosecutors immediately filed an appeal, demanding she be brought back to face trial alongside the others. For the remaining two defendants, the news was far more grim. Mario Vitorino and Marcelli Pareto were officially bound over for trial by jury. They now face charges of first-degree intentional homicide, with 3 aggravating factors: malicious motive, extreme cruelty, and the victim's inability to defend himself. The prosecution has drawn particular attention to the cold, calculated nature of this tragedy. The fatal blow was delivered by Igor's best friend, while his own sister stood nearby. And according to investigators, it was his wife who set the entire chain of events in motion from a distance. At the time of this report, the case remains unresolved. Mario and Marcelli are still awaiting a jury verdict from behind bars. Raffaella, for now, is free, but with the looming threat of being sent back to prison. Her release doesn't make this story any less terrifying. If anything, it reminds us that justice and the law don't always align. What elevates this case from a true crime narrative to something closer to a Greek tragedy is one haunting detail: blood ties. Igor and Marcelli weren't just roommates or business partners, they were brother and sister. For the Pareto family, this wasn't just a crime, it was a double blow. In a single night, they lost a son and a daughter, who became an accomplice to his destruction. Tiago Pareto, Igor's brother and a local city council member, became the most vocal figure demanding justice. He didn't try to protect his sister. In fact, he publicly called Marcelli a monster. He posted a heartbreaking piece of family footage. During the birthday of Igor's son, the boy, beaming with pride, offers the first, most important slice of cake to his favorite Aunt Marcelli. The same aunt who, years later, would open the door to the man who ended his father's life. Igor's mother, Donna Rose, gave an emotional interview, saying she was shattered by grief. The family took a hard line early on. They even hired a private investigator themselves to help track down the suspects. For Igor's father and brothers, that bond of blood was severed the moment Marcelli stepped over her brother's body. Now, they're demanding the maximum sentence for her, because betrayal like this, they say, can never be forgiven.